Well, this is Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that will determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and, well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Betty Martini. In fact, for the next 2 hours, as we're talking about one of the poisons that they're putting into the food chain. They know what they're doing. They're destroying the health of the American people. Aspartame and MSG, but specifically aspartame NutraSweet, is in so many products, especially given to children, where it'll do the maximum damage. Bisphenol, they have it in our cans, they have it in plastics, and certainly baby bottles. You heat those up, and of course what happens? Why do you don't want to give the baby a love cold milk? You heat it up, and of course then the bisphenol comes out of the plastic, gets into the milk, and the boys get a full dose of estrogens. And of course what we're doing is feminizing the boys. Why do you think so many have identity feminized? They know what they're doing. They do the same thing with phthalates, which are in plastics as well. So many of the chemicals in the cosmetics and things that you use, the things that smell so good, or the artificial odors, they are all toxic to you. Certainly the drinking excessive milk and as an adult, of course, it actually increases the incidence of prostate and breast cancer. They know these things, but if you talk about it, they'll come after you and they will get you. And that, of course, you will find the fructose corn syrup. They know it predisposes to diabetes. They know that certainly the fluoride in the drinking water is toxic and poisonous. They know that the soy, if you eat it, fermented soy is fine, but not the fresh soy. We have so much of it, and it predisposes to cancer and all sorts of toxicity. They know the toxicity of GMO foods. They know exactly what they're doing, but they control the media. We have freedom of the press in America, and that means when you control the media, why, of course, you have the freedom to suppress anything you want to, because all of the major corporations that are involved in controlling the media, and I'm talking about AOL, Time Warner, Bertelsmann, Viacom, Disney, certainly the people who control NBC now and Fox, they're all tied into the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, with us, of course, is Betty Martini, who's been on the front lines of trying to expose just one of those issues. Betty, how many years have you been trying to get people to understand they're putting a product that breaks down into formaldehyde and methanol, which is the deadly poison, into the food we're giving our children?
It's been 20 years, Dr. Stan. Time has flown.
Oh, well, I know. Have you ever thought, I know when your husband was ready to retire, he asked you whether you wanted to see the world or save the world, and you said you wanted to save the world. And I know how discouraging it must have been, but, I think we're making headway. I think that there are more and more people learning, don't you?
Oh, yes, the fact that they've changed the name. When criminals get too well known, they get an alias. So it's become so well known that Ajinomoto now has changed the name to AminoSweet, which of course is very deceptive since it's the free methyl alcohol and not the amino acids that sweeten the product. Hello?
Basically, you just got back from Hawaii and Indonesia. Why did you tell us about those trips? What happened and how they're doing everything they can to block your efforts to get this out of the state legislature's agenda and to suppress the information so they can continue destroying the lives of our children?
Well, one of the things in Hawaii is the fact of the type of food that children have over there in school, and they are getting aspartame. So I did go to Hawaii, and I spoke with Representative Denny Kaufman. A bill was written to remove aspartame from the schools in Hawaii, and then Representative Kaufman introduced it. So I don't know that if it will get through this year. It may have to wait till next year because of the necessity of getting a hearing set up. But at least the bill is now written. And then in the Senate, I think there were about 5 senators that introduced a bill to remove aspartame from Hawaii altogether. We've tried to do that 2 different years, so this is the 3rd time that we've made an effort. And while I was there, I met with other senators there and got information throughout the legislature. But the whole idea was to try to help see that children would no longer get this terrible neurotoxin, with their food.
Well, now, basically, I know before when you were there, why? Because the people who manufacture the aspartame had spent an awful lot of money on lobbyists to actually go there to lobby the legislators. So this would not even be considered, or certainly the last thing they want. If just one state outlawed it, why they could begin the demise of this deadly drug, which, of course, it's a demise of a deadly drug, which is, of course, damaging our children, our precious children.
Right, and also, it wasn't just Hawaii. New Mexico did for 2 years, and the Capitol was just saturated with lobbyists and attorneys and front groups. And they came forward. I was testifying with the Senate and also with the House, and also with Dr. Stoller, and we were very upset over the fact that the Senate was sitting there in front of us drinking Diet Coke to the point that Dr. Stoller got up and said, look, he says, I don't think we're going to get much progress with so many of you addicted to Diet Coke. He said, but at least have mercy on the children. And, of course, it did not get through. So it was being done in 2 different states, New Mexico and Hawaii.
But I think that you really need to, emphasize to these senators, when you get Parkinson's disease, what are you going to say? When you get early dementia and Alzheimer's disease, how are you going to feel about it? If your children, or your grandchildren come down with degenerative neurological disease or diabetes or, infertility or cancer, how are you going to feel? Because you're responsible. And if you don't have the courage to look at the scientific data and understand the FDA is lying to you, and of course there's an agenda behind this, and I don't hesitate at all. I used to say, it's all about money. No, it's not about money. There really are people who do have a deadly agenda, in my estimation.
Yes, and I've made this statement to them, as well as the FDA and even the European Food Safety Authority. I said, think about it while you sit back and don't do anything, that this can affect your children and your grandchildren. And so that you have to think more about the world than just the influence and the power of industry. And you would think they would do that. One of the biggest problems is this terrible addiction. And it changes brain chemistry, and sometimes people are no longer even rational discussing it. In fact, I happened to mention that to Dr. Deagle one day, and he says, well, Betty, it affects the frontal lobes first, and it's like talking to somebody who's had a lobotomy.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment here with Betty Martini. Give us a call if you have a question or comment, 1-800-259-5791. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network. Our guest, Betty Martini. Our telephone number is 1-800- 259-5791. That's 259-5791 if you have a question or comment for our special guest. But basically, of course, we're talking about, Betty's been at this for 20 years, crusading and going all over the world. She's been targeted repeatedly because she's bringing out the truth. She's trying to stop the poisoning. They know this is a poison. All the studies are there. But, of course, the people of the FDA were bought off. And at least, they're pretty loyal. Once bought off, they stay bought off. Now, there are a lot of people at the FDA who know what's going on and would like to speak out, but the hierarchy has effectively blocked them. Have you run into that, Betty?
Yes, in fact, interestingly, some years ago there was a reporter looking for a story, and we actually had someone from the FDA to give him some information, and the reason was that he himself had lost his mother to aspartame. Then the FDA found out about it, and the man almost lost his job. But there are those that try to speak out, and the big problem is that the FDA as a whole will absolutely do nothing, about it. You're talking about 30 years of scientific peer-reviewed studies showing all the problems that aspartame causes that they simply ignore. And look at the recent study about diet drinks being associated with heart attacks and strokes. And that wasn't the first time. That is the third study. There's recently been a new study by the Ramsini Institute about aspartame causing liver cancer and lung cancer. That was known all the way back in 1975.
Now, what was that report that recently came out again?
The study that was just announced was one that linked diet drinks with strokes and heart attacks.
Right.
That wasn't the first one. There was one in Boston some years ago, and then there was another one, I think it was, in around St. Louis, where they did a study.
Well, I think it was so interesting that one that just came out, there was something in it. We have no idea what it is, but there's something in the people who are drinking the diet drinks that is getting them a heart attack. And I'm sitting there saying, why don't you mention the aspartame in them? Well, there's something in them, that's doing this. And well, why don't you see what could be possibly in it that's doing it? Did you have that feeling almost of frustration as you saw that report coming out?
Yes.
Just asking, why don't you talk about what you must know, that the sweetener there is a poison that breaks down into formaldehyde and methanol. Why didn't they mention that?
Right, and I have answered it several times because it's very well known that aspartame causes irregular heart rhythm and interacts with all cardiac medication. It damages the cardiac conduction system and causes sudden death. And Dr. Russell Blaylock wrote an athlete alert. He also wrote one for pilots and how they drop dead. So we've had all these cardiac problems. I mean, the whole issue is very well known. Dr. Roberts even wrote a report about it. And look at this recent report from Denmark. I mean, this is done on humans, showing that up to 78% preterm babies with the use of aspartame. So it is study after study after study that's completely ignored by the government organizations. And they really don't care, because we got a call, I guess it's been about a year now. My husband answered the phone. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he said, honey, the FDA wants to talk to you. And I asked him, I said, hey, guys, what are you doing up at 2 o'clock in the morning? And they said, well, Obama wants us to finish up all correspondence. In 2007, we've got your imminent health hazard. And I said, well, that's supposed to be answered in a week of 10 days. I said, then you can go back 8 years with the citizens' petition for ban.